All right, get ready for a wild one today because we're going deep into the world of Wall Street in the 80s. Buckle up as we take a deep dive into Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis.
Oh, yeah. This one is a classic. It's more than just money, though. It's about the culture, the personalities, that whole crazy atmosphere of the trading floor.
So we're talking bond trading here. I think most people have heard that term, but what exactly were these guys at Salomon Brothers buying and selling? Like, why was it such a big deal back then?
Well, you can think of bonds like IOUs.
Hmm.
Companies or governments, they issue these bonds to raise money, promising to pay it back with interest. And in the 80s, interest rates, oh man, they were through the roof.
Through the roof. So bonds were like the hottest thing going.
Exactly. Investors were practically throwing money at them. It was a total boom time. And Salomon Brothers, they were right at the center of it all, like the cowboys of Wall Street.
Okay, so it was a gold rush, but for bonds. And I guess just like any gold rush, there was a lot of, well, let's say, competition. The book is called Liar's Poker for a reason.
Yeah, the title wasn't just a catchy phrase. Liar's Poker was a real game they played, these traders. All about bluffing and reading your opponent, taking big risks. It really captured the whole culture at Salomon Brothers.
So high stakes, high pressure, and maybe just a little bit of lying involved. Sounds intense.
Oh, it was.
And speaking of intense, Lewis starts the book by describing the Salomon Brothers training program back in 1985. Can you imagine? Hundreds of these ambitious young graduates crammed into a room, all fighting for a spot on that legendary trading floor.
It was a pressure cooker, for
Yeah.
sure. This was before online trading and all that. Fortunes were made and lost in seconds, with guys yelling and making crazy hand signals. It was a different world.
Lewis even tells the story about one trainee. The guy was so intimidated he just rode the elevator up and down, too scared to actually step onto the trading floor.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Talk about feeling the pressure. But that was Salomon Brothers. Sink or swim.
There was definitely a hierarchy there. You knew where you stood.
Oh, absolutely. And if you ended up in equities in Dallas, that was basically the end of the line, like being sent to Wall Street, Siberia.
So certain departments were more prestigious than others. I guess bonds were king.
You bet. Everyone wanted a piece of that action. But to survive, you needed a rabbi.
A rabbi. Wait, like a religious leader.
No, no, no. Uh-huh. In Salomon Brothers slang, a rabbi was a senior trader, someone to mentor you, show you the ropes, and hopefully stop you from making any career-ending mistakes.
Sounds like you needed more than just brains to succeed in that environment. You needed connections, street smarts, and a whole lot of guts.
No doubt about it. But even with a rabbi, it was a tough place to navigate. And things were changing at Salomon Brothers. They were trying to shift from this hardcore, risk-taking bond house to a more corporate image.
I bet that created some friction. Old school traders versus the new wave of corporate guys.
Oh, it was a culture clash for sure. And you really see that clash when we meet Louis Ranieri, the head of the mortgage trading department.
Now, Ranieri, he's a fascinating character.
Yeah.
Started in the Salomon Brothers mailroom, worked his way all the way up to partner. Talk about an underdog story.
It really shows his drive and ambition. But the funny thing is, his mortgage department, at first everyone saw it as a joke. The corporate bond traders, they looked down on them. They were the outcasts, the rebels of Salomon Brothers.
Rebels, huh? And I'm guessing these rebels were about to shake things up in a big way. We're talking about the rise of the mortgage machine, right? And this is where things get really interesting.
So Ranieri, he had this vision. He saw the potential in the mortgage market, especially with the savings and loan industry. They were at a real crisis back then.
So while everyone else, all the big shots, were focused on corporate bonds, Ranieri saw this opportunity, this whole market that nobody else seemed to get.
Yeah, that's it exactly. He understood those struggling savings and loans, their needs, their weaknesses better than anyone. And he built a team. They were hungry, scrappy, ready to take on the whole establishment.
Sounds like a real underdog story.
Oh, it was. And they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty either. Lewis, he described some pretty creative tactics they used, to really dominate that market.
Creative tactics. Okay, so what? They were bending the rules a bit?
Let's just say they were masters of information, right? They just knew more about the market than those savings and loan managers. And they definitely used that to their advantage.
There's that story about Andy Stone, one of Ranieri's traders, makes a $2.1 million profit in, what was it, like minutes, by buying bonds low and then selling them high to another thrift.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example.
Yeah.
Aggressive, relentless,
Yeah.
and incredibly profitable. That was how they operated.
But even in that world, that cutthroat environment, there were still some limits. Ranieri, when he found out about Stone's quick profit, he actually made him call the client back, told him to give them a fairer price.
It's funny, right? They were pushing things to the limit, but there was still this sense of, I don't know, professional courtesy. They didn't want to completely burn bridges.
So playing a dangerous game, but not totally ruthless.
Right. But their success, it wasn't going to last forever. The very thing that made them successful, that hunger, that competition, it eventually led to their downfall.
It's like that saying, live by the sword, die by the sword.
Yeah, exactly. Their compensation system, it was all about individual profits. That backfired big time. Top traders saw how much they were making. They wanted more.
If they didn't get it.
They walked, went to the competition. Merrill Lynch, First Boston, taking clients and all their knowledge with them.
A real brain drain.
Classic case of a company becoming a victim of its own success. Short-sighted, too focused on individual gains. They really undermine their own long-term stability.
And that's where we meet this character, Dash Riprock. He's like the voice of reason, or maybe the voice of doom.
Yeah, Dash. Cynical guy, but insightful. He tells Lewis to short the stock of Salomon Brothers. He basically predicts the whole thing is going to come crashing down.
He sees them getting too corporate, too much bureaucracy, losing that edge.
Yeah, he even makes fun of this fancy book and a commemorative bowl. Gutfreund, the head honcho, he had those made. To Dash, those things, they just represent everything wrong with Salomon Brothers. All about appearances, not substance.
And then, boom, the real trouble starts. Ronald Perelman, backed by Drexel Burnham and Michael Milken, they launch this hostile takeover bid, trying to swallow up Salomon Brothers whole.
Whoa, talk about a wake-up call. Suddenly they're exposed, vulnerable, built their whole empire on risky bets and cutthroat tactics. Now they're facing the music.
And there's this personal angle, too, right, between Gutfreund and Milken?
Oh yeah, those two. Some history there. A rivalry that just adds fuel to the fire.
Like a Shakespearean drama, but on Wall Street.
Exactly. And to make things even worse, this takeover attempt, it happens right as the stock market is about to crash.
Talk about bad timing.
Oh, it was a perfect storm. And that's what leads us to the climax of Lewis's time at Salomon Brothers. He calls it 8 days that shook Salomon. Chaos, uncertainty, leaked news of mass layoffs. It was total panic.
Whole departments gutted, people getting fired left and right. It's like the mighty Salomon Brothers just imploding.
Lewis really captures it, The confusion, the desperation of those 8 days. It's a reminder that corporate greed and this financial instability, it has a human cost.
But even in the middle of all that chaos, there are these moments of dark humor, right? Like Lewis describes Gutfreund buying Salomon stock as the price is plummeting. It's almost like he can't believe it, like he's in denial.
Yeah, that's a strange one. Arrogance, loyalty, maybe a bit of both.
Either way, it doesn't change the outcome. The mortgage department, the thing that drove their rise, it gets dismantled, key players fired, new management takes over.
End of an era. The rebels are gone, the old guard is out.
Yeah.
Salomon Brothers, they survive, but they're just a shadow of what they were.
So after this wild ride through 1980s Wall Street, what's the takeaway? Liar's Poker, it's not just a fun story, it's a warning about unchecked ambition, the dangers of greed. Reminds us that even on Wall Street, actions have consequences.
Makes you think about the role of these financial institutions, right?
Yeah.
And what happens when short-term gains are all that matter.
As we finish up this deep dive, think about what surprised you. And do you see any parallels between back then and what's happening in the financial world now?
Because the lessons of Liar's Poker, they're still relevant today.
Right.
The forces that shaped Wall Street in the 80s, they're still out there. It's up to us to learn from those mistakes.
Just when you think the story's over, Lewis throws a curveball. He gets sent to Salomon Brothers' London office, and it's like a whole different world.
It really is. It makes you wonder, how does that Salomon Brothers culture, all that intensity, how does that play out in a totally different environment?
Because of the London office, it was way more laid back. Not even close to the pressure cooker of the New York trading floor. Almost like a vacation.
Yeah, Lewis describes it as a place for the hacks, the guys who weren't cutthroat enough to make it in New York. They were happy with a good living, enjoying the perks, maybe taking a long lunch.
Sounds all right to me. But even though things were more relaxed in London, there was still someone watching, someone with a keen eye on Salomon Brothers, another Dash Riprock.
Isn't that something? You've got these two Dash figures, one in New York, one in London, both cynical, both insightful, and both predicting the firm's going to go down.
Makes you think maybe the problems at Salomon Brothers went deeper than just a few bad actors.
Like a systemic issue, right? A
Yes.
culture that was just too focused on the short game, on those quick profits, no matter what.
And Lewis himself, he gets caught up in it all.
Oh yeah, his time in London, it's a trip.
Hmm.
He starts as a nobody, a low-level salesman, but he climbs the ladder fast, learns the tricks, takes some risks, makes Salomon Brothers a ton of money.
But even as he's making bank, you can see he's getting disillusioned.
Yeah, he sees how far they'll go, how they bend the rules to make a buck, starts to wonder if it's all worth it.
Like he's trapped, right? Winning the game, but losing himself in the process. That kind of success, it comes with a price.
And that's what really stays with you after reading Liar's Poker. It's not just about Wall Street and all the greed. It's about us, about the choices we make, the compromises we're willing to live with. What does success really cost?
And those questions, they're still relevant today, right? You look around and those same forces are still shaping the financial world, that push for profits, the shortcuts, the potential for it all to blow up.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Liar's Poker, we hope it's given you something to think about, maybe even inspired you to examine the forces that are shaping all our lives. What are your priorities? What are you willing to sacrifice to reach your goals?
Because at the end of the day, success, it's not just about a dollar amount. It's about living a life that aligns with what you believe in. That's a lesson worth remembering no matter what you do.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Liar's Poker. We hope you'll keep those questions in mind. And until next time, keep exploring.